Number 1. Naked inspections in slave markets. In the bustling slave markets of the Ottoman Empire, women endured one of the most humiliating experiences imaginable. Upon arrival, they were lined up before wealthy buyers and officials there, clothing stripped away to reveal every inch of their bodies. This was not about beauty. It was about control, power, and assessing them like objects for sale. Traders would examine their skin, teeth, hair, and even their posture, commenting openly as if they were livestock. Any sign of a scar, illness, or imperfection could lower their value. For these women, this moment was the death of dignity, a public display that erased their humanity. The crowd did not see a person with a life, a family, or dreams, only a possession waiting to be owned. This cruel ritual was accepted as normal in that time, a grim reminder of how ignorance and greed can strip away the most basic human rights. Number 2. Branding with hot irons, once purchased. Some women were subjected to an act that permanently marked them as property, branding with hot irons. This was not just a symbol of ownership. It was a cruel declaration that their bodies no longer belonged to themselves. Heated metal rods, often engraved with a master's initials or a distinctive emblem, were pressed against the skin, usually on the arm, shoulder, or back. The searing pain was immediate and unbearable, leaving a scar that would last for life. For the enslavers, this was a way to claim their human possession and prevent escape. Anyone who saw the mark would know the woman was someone's property. For the women, it was a moment of deep despair, realizing that even their own skin had been taken from them. These brands were not just physical scars. They were constant reminders of the violence, the humiliation, and the complete loss of freedom. In the eyes of society at the time, these marks carried no shame for the oppressors, but for the women. They were a badge of pain that could never be erased. Number 3. Asterisk whippings during sexual acts. Greater than. Among the most brutal forms of abuse reported in historical accounts was the use of physical violence during intimate encounters. Some masters, driven by cruelty and dominance, used whips, rods, or leather straps even in moments meant to be private. For the women, there was no separation between pain and control. The whipping was not punishment for wrongdoing, but a tool to assert total power. The strikes could leave deep welts, bruises, and scars that took weeks to heal, yet the deeper damage was to the mind. These moments reinforced the message that they were not partners or companions, but possessions whose purpose was to submit. In some cases, the violence was carried out in front of others to intensify the humiliation, turning their suffering into a spectacle. While society ignored or even accepted these acts at the time, in reality, they were clear violations of the most basic human dignity. For the women trapped in these situations, each night could bring fear of what awaited behind locked doors. The scars, both seen and unseen, remained long after the moment had passed, reminders of a cruelty that no one should have to endure. Number 4. Forced bath rituals for master's pleasure, greater than in the palaces of the Ottoman Empire. Bathing was not a private comfort for enslaved women. It was a controlled, staged ritual designed for the master's eyes. After days of confinement, they could be summoned without warning to the baths. Servants would strip away their clothing and scrub their skin with rough sponges, sometimes until it reddened, then cover them in fragrant oils and perfumes. To outsiders, this might have seemed like luxury, but for the women, it was preparation. For exploitation, they had no say in whether they wanted the bath, no choice in who would watch, and no control over what would follow. Every step from the washing of hair to the brushing of skin was meant to make them more appealing, not more comfortable. In those dimly lit marble rooms, surrounded by steam and gold, there was no warmth in the process, only the cold. Reality that they were being readied for someone else's desire. The women learned to remain silent, their eyes lowered, knowing resistance could mean harsher punishment. This ritual became yet another reminder that their bodies were never truly their own. They were always at the mercy of another's will. Number 5. Forced fertility and child separation. Some enslaved women were forced to bear children for their masters, not out of love or choice, but as part of a plan to strengthen bloodlines or produce more servants. Pregnancy was not a blessing. In these cases, it was another form of control. From the moment they conceived, The women knew the child's future was not theirs to decide. In some situations, newborns were taken away immediately, sold to other households, or raised entirely within the palace under strict control. Never knowing their true mother, the emotional pain of such separation was immense, a wound deeper than any physical injury. Mothers were left with empty arms and memories that haunted them for years. In the cold logic of the system, the women were valued for their ability to produce life, yet denied the right to raise it. This cruelty robbed them not only of freedom over their own bodies, but also of the most natural bond between parent and child. It was a stark example of how far the institution of slavery could reach, controlling not just the present of a person's life, but their future and the future of their children. Number 6. Asterisk locking in pleasure chambers in certain palaces. Specific rooms were built not for living, but for prolonged captivity and abuse. These so-called pleasure chambers were richly decorated on the surface, velvet cushions, silk drapes, golden lamps, but they were cages in disguise. Once inside, women could be kept for days, sometimes longer, with no ability to leave until the master decided. Food and water might be provided, but freedom was not. These chambers were places where control was absolute, where the master's whims decided every hour. Even the beauty of the surroundings could become a torment, a reminder that no amount of luxury could make captivity feel less like a prison. Some women described the silence as unbearable, broken only by the sound of footsteps approaching, never knowing if those steps meant release or more suffering. The chambers symbolized a twisted version of paradise, where the appearance of comfort masked the reality of domination. For the women inside, each day felt endless. Every hour another reminder that even the most beautiful prison was still a prison. Number 7. Asterisk poisoned rivalry in harems. Greater than life in the harem was often portrayed in art as soft and glamorous. But the truth could be far more dangerous. Masters and their advisors sometimes deliberately created rivalries among the women. Knowing jealousy could be a powerful weapon, when a woman gained the master's attention, others might be pushed to desperation, fearing they would lose their own place in security. This could lead to whispered threats, sabotage, or even attempts at poisoning. While some rivalries were born from human emotion, many were encouraged by the master himself, a way to keep the women divided and easier to control. In this environment, trust was almost impossible. Every friendship could hide betrayal. Women might destroy each other's clothing, spread lies to damage reputations, or secretly harm one another in hopes of removing a rival. The harem became a place where survival meant constant vigilance, not against guards or walls, but against those living right beside you. This poisoned atmosphere ensured that no unity could form, and without unity, resistance was nearly impossible. Number 8. Chained in public for punishment. For women who dared to resist orders or show even the smallest sign of defiance. Punishment in the Ottoman era could be both brutal and public. One of the most humiliating methods was chaining them. In open courtyards or palace corridors, where servants, guards, and visitors could see them, heavy iron shackles would be locked around their wrists or ankles, forcing them into uncomfortable positions, sometimes kneeling on cold stone floors. For hours, even days, there was no privacy, no dignity, and no escape from the stares and whispers of those passing by. These punishments were not only meant to hurt physically, but also to break the spirit. By making the suffering visible to everyone, masters ensured that other women would think twice before questioning authority. The pain from the metal biting into their skin was constant, but the deeper wound came from knowing that their shame and misery had become a spectacle. In that time, such cruelty was seen as discipline, yet in truth, it was nothing more than a display of dominance, stripping away the last fragments of pride from already powerless lives. Number 9. Isolation and darkness after defiance, greater than for women who dared to refuse demands. Whether for labor or intimacy, the punishment could be total isolation. Locked in windowless rooms where no light could enter, they were left to sit in complete darkness for hours, days, or even weeks. The air grew stale, and the silence pressed in on every side, broken only by the occasional sound of a key turning in the lock. Food and water were minimal, sometimes withheld entirely for long stretches. In such conditions, time lost all meaning, fear became the only constant. The psychological toll was devastating. Some women emerged too weak to stand, their sense of reality shattered. This punishment was designed to break not just the body, but the will. By the time the door finally opened, many would agree to anything just to avoid returning to that darkness. In the eyes of their captors, it was effective discipline. In truth, it was calculated cruelty, a way to ensure obedience through the terror of absolute isolation. Number 10. Disposal after use. Once a woman was no longer considered desirable, whether due to age, illness, injury, or simply falling out of favor, her fate could turn even darker. Some were sold again, often to harsher masters, who paid less and cared even less. Others were sent to distant households where their living conditions would worsen drastically. In the most brutal cases, women could vanish entirely, quietly removed, abandoned, or even killed in secrecy to erase their existence. There were no farewells, no graves marked with names, no one to speak for them, their years of service, their suffering, their humanity, all forgotten in an instant. For the enslavers, this was merely replacing what they saw as property. For the women, it was the final act of erasure. Proof that their lives were always seen as temporary, disposable, and without value in the eyes of those who controlled them. This final cruelty ensured that, for many, their stories would never be told, and their pain would vanish into the silence of history unless we choose to remember.